If Captain Kidd had his backstory animated, he would be a lot more loved than he currently is right now. Only problem is, Oda has this issue where he'll put the backstories of characters like this in an SBS instead of the manga or the anime. And most people don't read the SBSs. And if you're one of them, it's cool because I got you. Let me explain to you how Useless Kid became captain of the Captain Kidd Pirates. So Kid grew up on an island in the South Blue along with Killer, Heat, and Wire. But from a young age, Kid and Killer were cool, so they didn't know Heat and Wire just yet. And one of the things that Kid and Killer were able to bond over is their love for Victoria, because they both loved her and they were both trying to win her over, even though, they both ended up making her hate them by spilling some food on her shirt. So, it's kind of lighthearted, but then once they get older, things start to take a turn for the worse. Because the country that Kid and Killer grew up in was not a world government affiliated country, so they had to just fend for themselves. So as a result, there was kind of like a gang, giant mafia that became the royalty of this entire place. And Kid, Killer, Heat, and Wire were 4 leaders of different gangs all around this country. So a lot of gang activity. You can kind of see why Kid is the way that he is, because this is the type of environment that he grew up in. He didn't have people like Shanks and Makino around to kind of keep the peace for him. Every day it was fighting and shooting. He was living in the deepest part of the hood for his entire life. And then one day Victoria ends up getting killed by one of these royal people that are a part of this gang that control the entire country. And we saw what Kid does to people like this that just want to leave the new world. What do you think he did to the people that did that to Victoria, his love interest? This dude ended up going around the entire country on his own little adventure to recruit all the people that were the leaders of these other gangs. So that's how he got, Killer was already with him, that's his boy, but that's how he got Heat and Wire. And with their forces combined, they waged war against this gang royal family that controls this entire country, and they took them and their military out. And I'm not gonna front, that's a wildly boss thing to do. But understandably so, he doesn't want to stay in this country that took away the love of his life. He wants to now move on to the rest of the world, because he sees that there's more out there. And, seeing that they're able to rally behind Kid and he gets stuff done, Heat and Wire, they come along with him and Killer you know what? We'll stay with you. We'll rock with you. And then, he has his own little escapade of adventures before he gets to Sabaody Archipelago where we first meet him. So with more information about his backstory, you kind of understand why he said what he said when he first came in on Sabaody. He sees the celestial dragons going around. He's compared to these celestial bastards, we look like saints. We know that we're not perfect, but we still kind of cute, right, Killer? And he's no mistake. And now that you know more of his backstory, you're okay, he does have some good in him. He will fight for a just cause if he cares about him, similar to Luffy. Not just that, but even similar to people like Goldie Roger. Because let's not forget it, we do have a flashback with Garp letting us know that there was a time where a country made fun of somebody in Roger's crew, and they went and laid waste to their entire military. All over some words. Meanwhile, Kid did what he did because of the death of a loved one. So to the people before that were saying well, Kid is still not a good person because he'll kill or take people out that make fun of his crew, and that's an overreaction, Roger did the same thing, so chill out. And since we know that Kid is clearly not dead, because the way that he was completely eradicated was the exact same way as Luffy, which left the power vacuum where they used to be, where a pirate named Tomorrow Black will come in and pretend to be them. He's literally just following Luffy's playbook right now. That's all that's happening. But to the people that were thinking that if Kid comes back, he might not go for the One Piece no more because he lost too much of his crew, now that you know his backstory, do you think that he's still going to do that? He waged war and took over a country basically for killing his love interest that didn't even love him back. You think he not spinning back for his crew if Shanks really did kill a good chunk of them? You can think he's sweet if you want to, but keep in mind, Oda was he was the only dude out of the supernova that I planned out. Everybody else came overnight. Big things are on the way. One thing I never thought about is the fact that since Kid loves his ship so much, even though Shanks was able to split it in half like this, there was still a realistic possibility that his ship could save him the same way that Mary was able to save Luffy and everybody back at Enies Lobby. Because the clawbalterment of a ship is not exclusive to the Mary and the Straw Hats. Frankie already explained to us that it was among the legends that if you treat your ship really well and you love it, then your ship will also protect you. And when it comes to Kid's ship, he's clearly put a whole lot of work into this thing. Even some of the stuff that might seem random on the ship, like the skull on the front, has a purpose. It's still connected to the deck, so people can go and check and see what's happening forward while being protected from cannon fire coming from above or the side. Very well crafted ship. And on top of that, since he named it after his love interest, I'm pretty sure he loves his ship. And while yes, I do know that it was split in half, you gotta remember the Mary was also split in half. It's just that Luffy's ship was split in half from the front to the back. Meanwhile, Kid's was split in half from the left to the right. And when it comes to the Club Baltimore, you cannot underestimate their craftsmanship either. The Mary had the mast of the ship ripped straight off, and while everybody else was asleep except for Usopp, the spirit of the ship put it back on and, hammered it in. Obviously, all these fixes weren't permanent fixes, but it was just enough to get the crew to safety. And with the way that kid clearly cares about his crew, clearly cares about his ship, for extremely obvious reasons, I would not be surprised if in this moment the Club Ultimate revealed itself to him or Killer. And maybe the ship doesn't put itself back together the same way the Mary did, because the Mary did have Iceberg to fix some of the bigger damage. But at this point, I would not be surprised if it can at least get Killer and Kid to safety, because the spirit of the ship, Victoria, knew these two, not everybody else. And I think it would make sense if majority of the crew died except for Kid and Killer. Because out of everybody on that ship, when it came to those two who loved Victoria, the ship would love them in return the most.